Gonzo Today newsroom, this is Memos from the National Affairs Desk. Presented by Gonzo Today. www.gonzotoday.com. The weird have just turned pro.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Gonzo Today's Memos from the National Affairs Desk. I'm your host, Dr. Jeffurious Higgason. In Illinois this week, the FBI and federal prosecutors are investigating whether Representative Aaron Schock broke the law in accounting for campaign expenses. This past week, Schock announced plans to resign, citing controversy surrounding allegations and that he improperly accounted for travel and other contributions from donors and mileage reimbursements for a personal car he purchased with campaign funds. But the probe, managed by prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Springfield, Illinois, means his legal troubles are just beginning. The federal investigation is focused on at least three questions, according to people familiar with the inquiry, including the mileage reimbursements, travel that was paid for by donors, and in-kind contributions from donors that were not reported. The FBI is reportedly delivering subpoenas in Washington and in Illinois. Investigators from the U.S. Postal Inspection Service and the IRS are pursuing various parts of the Schock investigation, according to law enforcement sources. A controversy that began with questions sparked by a lighthearted profile of Schock's Downton Abbey-themed office bloomed into a full-blown scandal over the past month that caused the rising GOP star rapid fall from grace. The U.S. law enforcement official says the investigation is at an early stage. Justice Department officials were monitoring published reports about Schock's expense troubles and were taken by surprise when he announced his resignation. Environmental advocates in Florida are asking for an investigation into claims that an unwritten policy exists within the state government that prohibits its workers from using the terms, quote, climate change or global warming when speaking in an official capacity. The Tallahassee Democrat reported that about a dozen members of the environmental group Forecast and Facts showed up to the state capitol building in Tallahassee on Friday to deliver more than 40,000 electronically signed petitions asking for the probe. The group members also demonstrated against such a policy by wearing duct tape over their mouths with the words climate change written across it. The petitions asked for an investigation by the Inspector General of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Activists say they want to know whether Governor Rick Scott has ever directed or encouraged state agencies to avoid using the terms in official government communications and documents. Allegations of the directive were first reported earlier this month by the Florida Center for Investigative Reporting, which cited former DEP employees who had claimed they were told to avoid using the phrases. Forecast and the Facts has submitted a public record request of communications between Governor Scott and the DEP that references the terms climate change and global warming. Governor Scott's office has officially denied the allegation and insisted that the second-term Republican governor is working to address and resolve the state's environmental concerns. Thursday, State Senator Jeff Clements attempted to get Governor Scott's chief of emergency management to utter the phrase climate change during testimony before a Senate subcommittee with no success. Brian Kuhn had several opportunities to use the phrase, but never did. Clemens asked whether states are required to have climate change plans on the books in order to receive federal emergency funds that Kuhn's agencies has requested. Kuhn responded in the affirmative, referring to language to that effect. Like many Republicans, Scott indicated he was skeptical of man-made climate change during his first successful gubernatorial campaign in 2010, but he seemed to widen his view on it by the time of last year's campaign. That was when he consulted with several climate scientists. This is all according to a report from CBS Miami. Earlier this month, a DEP employee was reprimanded and sent home after he publicly stated his opinion on the controversial Keystone XL oil pipeline and climate change. A land management plan coordinator, the employee was also told he couldn't return to the office until he had been medically cleared by a doctor. The DEP said he was disciplined for poor performance, insubordination, and conduct on becoming a public employee. The Florida chapter of Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility said the DEP's decision to discipline the worker is another indication that the allegations of the phrase bans are true.
Watch. They'll say it happened because I was drinking. Sure, I was drinking. But I was also eating. That third double martini was starting to get to me. It's a good thing the waiter brought food. Nothing like a good wine with dinner. With a big meal, it's harmless as water. Yeah. They'll probably want to give me a blood alcohol test. I don't care. But I'd sure hate to take the test if I hadn't eaten all I did. A meal like I just had really soaks up the alcohol. Like a sponge. Oh boy, I kind of overdid it tonight with all that eating and drinking. But everybody knows that you can drink all you want, as long as you eat enough. Sure, Mac. Sure.
Don't you go, motherfucker, and me. Boys, don't go, motherfucker, and me. Don't you go, motherfucker, and me. Boys, don't go, motherfucker, and me. Well, I'll tell you, my brother, and all of you others, if I had my druthers, I'd be cocksucker. Don't you go, motherfucker, and me. Boys, don't go, motherfucker, and me. I'll be strangled and stripped, I'll be wet noodle whipped. Don't you go, motherfucker, and me. I'll be chained to the wall and kicked in the balls. Don't you go, motherfucker, and me. I'll be smeared on the ass with a broken glass. I'll be reamed in the rear by a kosher spear. Don't go, motherfucker, and me. Boys, don't go, motherfucker, and me. I'll be plugged by a slug with a date rape drug. Don't you go, motherfucker, and me. I'll be wined and dined by a sad porcupine. Don't you go, motherfucker, and me. I'll be seduced by a moose whose reputation is loose. I'll hold the load of a horny toad. Don't you go, motherfucker, and me. Boys, don't go, motherfucker, and me. Oh, don't you go, motherfucker, and me. Boys, don't go, motherfucker, and me. Don't you go, motherfucker, and me. Boys, don't go, motherfucker, and me. Well, I'll tell you, my brother, and all of you others, if I had my druthers, I'd be cocksucker. Don't you go, motherfucker, and me. Boys, don't go, motherfucker, and me. Don't you go, motherfucker, and me. Boys, don't go, motherfucker, and me. Don't you go, motherfucker, and me. Boys, don't go, motherfucker, and me. Well, I'll tell you, my brother, and all of you others, if I had my druthers, I'd be cocksucker. Don't go, motherfucker, and me. Boys, don't go, motherfucker, and me.
The U.S. federal government introduced new rules Friday on hydraulic fracturing, measures industry backers said would impose a barrier to growth. The Bureau of Land Management introduced final standards for hydraulic fracturing on public and tribal lands in the United States. U.S. Interior Secretary Sally Jewell said the final rule updates measures that in some cases are more than 30 years old and therefore outdated in the new era of shale. The Interior Department said that more than 100,000 oil and gas wells exist currently on land managed by the federal government. Of those, more than 90% use hydraulic fracturing. Rules that go into force in 90 days call for higher standards to mitigate environmental risks, increased transparency about the chemicals used during the hydraulic fracturing process, and provisions to ensure groundwater supplies are protected. An Ohio State University study published in October found bad well design, not hydraulic fracturing itself, was behind some reports of drinking water contamination. The increase of U.S. oil production, producing 9.4 million barrels per day, is a near 40-year record. This all due in part to advances in hydraulic fracturing. Natural gas production since 2011 has increased more than 6%. The American Petroleum Institute, which represents the interests of the energy sector, said that the BLM measures are prohibitive. By API's accounts, gas production from federal lands alone is down 21.6% since 2009. BML estimates new measures would translate to a 0.25% increase in the cost of a drilling of a well. The Independent Petroleum Association of America and Western Energy Alliance filed suit in U.S. District Court for the District of Wyoming, contesting the rule, calling it the product of a procedural deficient rulemaking process. The Independent Petroleum Association of America and Western Energy Alliance filed suit in U.S. District Court for the District of Wyoming, contesting the rule, calling it the product of a procedural deficient rulemaking process. Requiring oil and natural gas operators to file repetitive paperwork in multiple government agencies will not prevent or remediate the environmental harm, Attorney Mark Barron said in a statement. To the contrary, if implemented, the rule will rob oil and gas operators of the operational flexibility needed to ensure that the environmental footprint of development is reduced to the greatest extent possible. 3 South Florida police officers were fired and a 4th resigned over the exchange of a racially biased video and messages, according to officials. The Fort Lauderdale Police Department announced on Friday the termination of Chris Sousa, James Wells, and Jason Holding, as well as the resignation of Alex Alvarez. A 5-month internal affairs investigation found the officers had exchanged text messages using racially offensive terms in reference to African American citizens encountered in the line of duty, as well as critical comments about the grammar, appearance, and work ethic of black co-workers. The investigation began when Alvarez's ex-fiancée came forward with evidence. Dozens of pages of messages revealed text referring to violence towards African Americans, while others featured derogatory comments towards Hispanics and homosexuals, the report said. According to investigators, Alvarez created a mock video trailer called The Hoods, which featured images of a Ku Klux Klan hood and President Obama with large gold teeth. Fort Lauderdale Police Chief Frank Adderley said the officers worked in a predominantly African American community. No kidding. The mayor of Fort Lauderdale, Jack Seeler, said that he was very disappointed, disgusted, and shocked by the exchanges, and added the inappropriate racist behavior exhibited by those involved is unacceptable and reprehensible. It also violates the trust we place in our law enforcement officers. It damages the bond we have established in our community and undermines the standards in which each and every city employee is held accountable. The Fraternal Order of Police said in a statement Friday that it is a multicultural organization which does not tolerate racism, but added that everyone is entitled to due process and these officers have the right to a fair review of the facts. In January, police snipers in neighboring Miami were found to have used mugshots of real black men from the area as targets in a shooting range. North Miami Beach Police Chief J. Scott Dennis said his officers should have used better judgment, but denied racial profiling had occurred. And just a reminder, we do have Gonzo Fest coming up less than a month away, up on April the 11th down in Louisville, Kentucky. You can get your tickets, more information at www.gonzofestlou.com. And that does it for this week's edition of Gonzo Today's Memos from the National Affairs Desk. I've been your host, Dr. Jeffurious Higgason. Look us up on the web, gonzotoday.com, and we're over at Facebook as well. And I believe we're tweeting sometimes at the Twitter. So check us out. We're everywhere. Gonzo Today, the weird, have just turned pro. Gonzo Today's Memos from the National Affairs Desk. Copyright 2015. See you next week, folks. Keep your heads up.
The news you have just heard was a digest of Press Association dispatches. Further details will be found in your newspapers.